All right. So why don't I start with a welcome to NSGIC's GIS 101 webinar series. NSGIC stands for National States Geographic Information Council. It's a state-led organization that brings people and organizations together to share smart geospatial solutions that work well for all of us. We're all about connecting the dots between states, federal, private organizations, the different sectors and systems to, make that technology and data work best for everyone. Today's topic is map accessibility, and based on the hundreds of people here, I'm pretty sure everyone understands why it's so important. But just as a reminder, some of the things that increased accessibility bring us are equity and inclusion, a much larger audience reach, improved usability for everyone because these practices help everyone, better search engine optimization, which many of our bosses want us to have. And for many of you, based on the emails I got, the shocking reminder that states and local governments are required to conform to WCAG 2.1 level standards by April of 2026. So, and NSGIC has an accessibility group that focuses specifically on geospatial and accessibility. So London, would you like to give us a quick note on that?
Yeah, thanks, Shay. So my name is London and I'm from the Accessibility Working Group. And what we try to do is come up with resources and events to help people achieve better GIS accessibility and understand it better, especially with the upcoming law. And we have an accessibility interest group on my NSGIC. And then we also have a website that has some resources and an intro on how to get started. And then we also have a one-pager, and I will post all these links after. And then we are also having an upcoming event on July 10th about it's an accessibility panel with people in different groups that are at different stages of accessibility. And so that way we can hear what people are doing to help get started with accessibility and struggles that we may be having. And so just look out for more information on that. And if you have interest in joining the working group, you can definitely let us know. But yeah, I think that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you so much, London. So as a reminder, Minnesota has been doing fantastic work, leading edge work on advancing accessibility in their maps, websites, and digital documents. And today we are welcoming and grateful to Amy Ellison and Jason Ewart, who will be walking us through what they've done, what they've learned, and what they've made available. Thank you to help others improve accessibility. Again, for those of you who just joined in the last 30 seconds, please keep yourselves muted, cameras off, put any questions you have in the chat, and we will bring them up to Amy and Jason at the end of the presentation. There'll be plenty of time for questions. And a recording of this webinar will be made available on NSGIC's website. We'll send a link so you can get that. So yes, it is being recorded and we will get you that so you can share it with people. So on that note, Amy and Jason, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Same. Yeah, thank you so much for having us today. I'm going to start us off today. My name is Amy Ellison. I am the cartographer for Minnesota State Parks and Trails. I manage and maintain all 700 of our public-facing maps that serve 13 million people a year that visit our state parks and trails. And I've been with the DNR for almost 27 years, so a lot of questions about accessibility and a lot of things that we've been able to kind of hear from the public and be able to address in a lot of our documentation. So I'm going to start off just by talking a little bit about Minnesota's journey, how we got to the point that we are at. And then Jason and I will go through some of the documentation that we've put together for the state and some of the premise behind some of those documents that we've put together. So with that being started, I'm going to start sharing my screen. I'm going to turn off my video because I can't talk and present at the same time, apparently. All right. Start the slideshow. Here we go. All right. So Minnesota has been working on figuring out map accessibility for quite a long time. We have been asked to create everything that we can in an accessible manner. This includes all of our physical locations as well as everything that we provide digitally. Yeah,
Amy,
yeah.
I'm going to jump in. Are you sharing your screen? Because we're not seeing any slides.
Oh, yeah, it says I am.
Might need to click the button one more time.
Let's see here. Can you see anything here?
No, we're just seeing you and Jason.
Let's try that again.
There,
Share.
it's starting.
Can you see it now? Okay.
Almost. There we go. And we're seeing like the presenter view there. And now we're seeing the
Now you're
final view.
seeing,
Thank
okay.
you so much, Amy.
Fabulous. Sorry, we usually use Teams, so Zoom is always kind of like, oh, am I doing this right? So anyway, everybody can hear and see and everything now, hopefully.
Yes. Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Our first thing, just a little bit of background on the state of Minnesota's journey. So in 2010, we were given a mandate to make everything online accessible. And this came from an actual lawsuit that we were faced with in 2010 on a physical barrier. And that brought a lot of questions about, well, what do we mean by accessible and a lot of different things. So there was nothing in Section 508 about map accessibility specifically. I had begun to contact several organizations that work with people with some visual impairments, and no one could really tell us what makes a map accessible. In 2015, a small group of DNR employees gathered and led by the department web and accessibility coordinators started to discuss this. And we realized that we needed a larger statewide group to convene to make some decisions regarding map accessibility. 2016, we had our first statewide or state agency-wide meeting of the Accessible Maps Community of Practice. And as of today, it is 75 plus members strong. We have participation from every state agency and some non-state groups that are kind of pseudo-state, like the University of Minnesota, our Metro Transit, Metropolitan Council, and we are led by the Minnesota Office of Accessibility. So all of our documentation is housed on that site. So when we started talking about this, we asked a bunch of our colleagues, like what kind of maps they made and what level they had of cartographic design and you know, what level experience they had and anything with accessibility. And we found that many staff were kind of trained in running software. So ArcPro, ArcView, ArcMap, all the different things. But not very many had actually had classes that talked about like actually good cartographic design. And that's kind of the baseline for a lot of accessible design is being able to be trained in how to make a good map. And so we as a group decided that we need to make decisions based on our research on what we meant by an accessible map. There's a lot of good guidance on PDFs and stuff from Adobe and WCAG for interactive maps. Picking colors was one of the #1 things that we found that people had a difficulty with as far as accessibility. And we also recognized as a group that we needed to make recommendations and easy access for folks to be able to encourage staff to make their maps more accessible to more people. So we're just going to start this off. Nothing can be 100% accessible to all people. Everybody has varying differences within each person's ability. And we're also limited in the tools that we have in design and testing. A lot of software nowadays have color vision filters and things like that that you can simulate. At the time that we started this, it was not quite as far along as it is now. So we love that. We also recognized that we have a statement in the state of Minnesota for all of our publications that says this document is available in alternative format upon request. We realized that we needed to kind of think of an alternative format for literally every product that we were going to be developing. And this didn't mean that we actually had to create that alternative format, but it should be thought of in the initial creation of any kind of product. Nothing is perfect. We design to the best of our abilities using the knowledge and tools that we have available to be more inclusive in our initial designs. Things that we can design for, visual impairments such as blindness in conjunction with assistive technologies, color vision deficiency, which most people know as color blindness and low vision. We can also design maps on the web for motor and cognitive impairments as well, or impairments as well. Okay, so a little bit about what we mean by color vision deficiency. Many of you have heard of red-green color vision deficiency, and those are protanopia and deuteranopia, and kind of the simulation of what you see there is what a person with those um, abilities would be able to see. And then it's a huge percentage of the people around the world. There's about 300 million people affected by this, which is almost the population of the United States, which is 345 million. So it's a huge percentage of people. And tritanopia is a form of blue-yellow color vision deficiency. It's extremely rare, but it's also important to think about in your design. Low vision. This is what having low vision looks like. If you have 20/70 vision, that is considered low vision. But these are things that are more specifically typed where you cannot actually use glasses. We're not talking about like needing cheaters to be able to see things. These are things that can't be corrected either with pharmaceuticals or with glasses or any kind of equipment, unfortunately. So if someone has low vision, there's a lot of different things that we can do to design and help with that. All right, so with the culmination of everything that our group put together, we ended up with 3 different categories. They are now like they're hosted on the Office of Accessibility site for the state of Minnesota, and that's at mn.gov/map-accessibility. And I'm just going to show off just a little bit about that real quick. So on the map accessibility page, we have map design, static digital maps, which are PDFs, JPEGs, etc., and interactive maps. So if you're doing any one of these things, you can go to any of these sites to kind of learn more. And each one of these sites will have something. So for example, map design, which is kind of my specialty. We have a quick card that will get you some information, just some quick and dirty information about basics about map accessibility in your design. And we also have a full version of a guide for each one of our units. That kind of goes into far more detail. This one's 17 pages long, but it talks about color and fonts and patterns and all the different things. So there's different objects, symbology, line styles, things like that, that we'll talk a little bit about today. But all of these are included in the Office of Accessibility site. On the map design portion, we also have style file downloads, which will help if you're using Illustrator products or ARC products. This says ARC Map, and we have tested it for ARC Pro, so it is actually able to be used. But we also have downloads that you can put in as style files for either of these 2 programs. So check them out after the meeting, obviously not right this second. All right, moving along. Some of the things that we found out that are not in our control. Perception is one of these things. It's inherently unique to each individual. And this popular dress color meme kind of proves that not all of us can see things in the same way. So quickly, what do you guys see in these colors? You don't have to answer, but just kind of think in your mind, like what colors do you see when you look at this picture? According to a study done at MIT, 1,400 people were surveyed. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But some people see a lot of different colors. The results of that study kind of showed that there were several different factors that affect perception, like age, gender, assumptions of daylight versus blue light, and illumination. So some recommendations for map design. First things that you should ask yourself is why a map? What is the purpose of the map? And can the information be better portrayed in another way? Your map should tell a story, and we shouldn't get lost in the weeds with so much information. A lot of times, less is more, especially for people that, in these days, like map orienteering and things like that aren't necessarily taught. It's a skill that's developed kind of throughout a person's lifetime, either using Google Maps or some other kind of map format or whatever. But it's not always perfectly inherent, especially when everybody's using different colors, different formats, different types of information. So do not put too much information on your map. If it doesn't give added value to the reader, then it's better to just get rid of it. Best practices in color accessibility. So choose your color based on information hierarchy. If you are using a base map for your map, then it should be muted either by transparency or use of muted colors, and contrast is super imperative. If possible, do not rely on color alone to communicate your information. And if this is being printed, this is a whole nother side thing, but RGB, which is just lights on screen, versus CMYK ink on paper, makes a big difference in the type of paper. And I could go on and on for days about just printing and how accessibility is affected by that, but I will not bore you with that at this moment. All right, a little more about background imagery. Usually imagery is used as a supporting element for information. So make sure the background that's being used isn't going to interfere with the map objects on top. As you can see, someone with protanopia would have had a great difficulty, which is the red-green color vision deficiency. They'd have great difficulty seeing the information on this map, both because of the colors chosen, the shadowed text as well, but also because of the somewhat muddiness of the aerial itself. Some colors blend into the background, so you can see like a lot of this red is actually becoming part of the background. You can't really see it. But also, if you were to pull this transparency or this base map back with transparency, those map objects should pop off a little bit more clearly. So then the base map would be considered a supporting piece, not the main show. Scale, making sure that your scale is appropriate for the information is very key. If important contextual information isn't readable, your scale may need to be reconsidered or adjusted, and you may need additional detailed maps, like insets of a particular thing, if the information isn't clearly read at the scale that you need to use. Patterns and lines, limit the use of patterns. Patterns are very distracting and difficult to distinguish with elements on top, particularly for those with low vision. If you can add transparency to the pattern, that's even better. It helps to avoid overwhelming the viewer. And try not to use dashed or dotted lines on top of fully opaque patterns. So as much as you can, bring some of that transparency back so that the important information, the hierarchical information, is the first thing that's being seen. All right, some additional considerations for low vision. A few cartographic best practices are: do not use underlined text. Not only can it be confused for a hyperlink, but it is also harder to read, especially for our low vision users. And do not overlap labels. Keep white space around every object, and remove unnecessary multiples of labels so that there's less to interpret. If you have multiple labels showing up in your annotation, go ahead and remove some of them. If you've got a lot of road labels or names of things, if it's already named once or twice in the area, then you can remove some of that. Do not place labels upside down or squished. Make sure that the kerning or the spacing between the letters is maintained. And do not use shadowed text. Shadowed text blends those characters together. So halos might be a better alternative to pop out objects, because they completely surround the text object instead of blurring the edges around it. All right, so now we're moving on from design to some static digital maps key points. Export usable formats. Flattened PDFs work out the best. If you need to export your PDF with layers, it's actually going to make a little bit of a mess with some of the screen readers out there. Put as few attributes as possible, or items may disappear when applying your accessibility items. So I've found that things that I've tagged, sometimes just the graphic pieces disappear and go behind other elements. So making sure that some of that can be avoided is great. And enable human contact. Give a general contact person that is easy to find, and make sure that the contact person is knowledgeable about the content of the map. And tag your map. Everything in your map you can tag as one figure if it's a larger type thing, like a wayfinding product or something. But if it's something that's a little simpler, you can tag the elements within the map. But add a brief alternative text or an alt text to flow with the document's other elements. So speaking of simple versus complex maps, most maps will fall into two categories. A simple map is a map where you can actually show the information in another format, like a table or a pie chart. like a chloropleth map. Your simple maps should meet contrast ratios online per WCAG standards, and a quantitative format should be accompanying the graphic, whether it be online. You can wait for it to be requested, but you can also just address that immediately. And complex maps that have more than 3 graphical data points, like a wayfinding map, you don't know what the intended reader is actually wanting to do with that map. So they should be treated as a graphic and converted to an image and to use alt text rather than tagging items in the map that won't make sense to visually impaired individuals. Blurting out a bunch of labels isn't going to help someone who can't see what those labels mean. All right, and I'm going to head it off to Jason. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
Cool. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Jason Ewert. Among other things, I'm a GIS web application developer at the state of Minnesota. I use he, him pronouns. I have slightly graying hair and a gray beard with glasses, and I'm very excited to be here and that you all showed up. This is super cool, and it's a really a fun topic to talk about. It's a really fun topic to work on. Lots of challenges, and that makes the work super interesting. So on the list of all the reasons why it's a good idea to take this work on, that's a really big one. Let's see. And we're going to be sharing, and there'll be a live demo. So this will be an adventure, as it usually is. I've been looking at some of the comments. There's one about PDFs, which is not in my content, but we do have some scripts available in a zip file on that website. I'll throw a link into the question too, and some other accessible PDF making material there too that's I've been working out. But generally, I think people go from Pro to Word and Word into PDF because of the tagging. But my specialty is web applications, and kind of with accessibility testing and coming up with solutions to some of these things. You got to set down one problem and pick up another. So we're going to set down color, and we're going to pick up content. And how do we get content to people? And the really nice part about HTML and JavaScript is we can get a lot of that content out to folks. So what is HTML? Very foundationally, the web pages you are reading have well-structured HTML content. And this will apply to your PDF. This will apply to your Word document as well. But with a well-structured document, we want a header. So like say a screen reader knows that that's the header information, maybe followed by a navigation. So we can navigate the website. And that's an actual HTML tag, a nav tag. And that tells the screen reader that, hey, you're on this navigation element, and what you're going to see is going to take you to other places on this website. That would be followed by a main element, so your main content. It might have article in there. It might have headings, H1s, H2s. Be very careful not to skip heading levels. So if you have a 1 and a 3, make sure you have a 2. And then under those heading levels, you'll have content. And what things like screen readers can do is preview the headings. So if you have an H1, it'll say H1 and the title, 2 title. You can skip through them and preview the web page that you're on and get yourself an overview of the content that's there. And then the other thing, kind of basic web pages have are lists. So you have unordered lists and ordered lists. The screen reader will tell people like, this is a list with 5 elements. This is a list with 300 elements. You kind of want to know that before you start reading through it, right? So to make things more accessible, you got to start from a place of well-structured HTML where that has the right tags and labels and things. The next thing you might run into on the web is a form, and forms are pretty standard. You'll see them all over the place. Forms have their own workflow. People are used to encountering forms. Form elements might have name, address, phone number kind of tags on them. These are the things that make autofill possible. So you type in your name, and you hit autofill and the address and the phone number and stuff fill out below. And the only reason that the browser that has your information knows where to put that data on the form is because it's tagged and structured well. And this helps with screen readers. This helps with autofill. So you're kind of making the whole world easier for everyone. So those two scenarios are common. It's a common pattern. We have certain expectations when we get to a website. You're signing up for something new. You are going to, you're going to expect that the form autofills. It tells you what the input button is for. If you submit a form, not only should it do the thing, but if you're using a screen reader, you're going to want to know that the thing was done. So some kind of confirmation of, hey, your form was successfully submitted. Or if there's an error, that the error is read and you know where to go for the error. Maybe it changes your focus so you're automatically on the box that needs to be fixed. So those things are pretty common. And then when we get into this world of web applications, which is what I lump web maps into, you're dealing with JavaScript for the most part. And your web app can be really anything. So if I'm on a page and I'm reading articles with headers and content, I can understand that. If I'm filling out an application for something, I understand that. If I get into a web app, it could really be anything. And what we need to do as developers is follow common patterns as much as possible. And we need to explain what this is and why you're here and what it should do and kind of set the stage for what to expect. So yeah, we need to make the brave new world that we are presenting to our users discoverable. So one of the things to start off, give yourself a good foundation and a good chance of success is to worry about your application's flow. And by flow, I'm talking about focus order. I'm talking about the elements that the user encounters as they tab through, as their screen reader reads. So again, you start with H1, and under there you have some content that explains why you're here. And maybe the tool that does the thing is next. In this example that I'm sharing, there's a search. You enter the search, you expect to see some results. So the next thing in focus order is the search result and the content of the search result, and whatever important information that has is conveyed there. And then very last, we have more detail. We have this picture of your search results, which in this case is a map. And you're looking at the Target Center in Minneapolis and this nice green roof. So the Timberwolves are playing tonight. So we have title, why am I here, search results, map. And that would be the tab order of this simple application. We'll use this as a demo in a second. So I know why I'm here, what I need to do, I think it's done. I get some information, and then I get some more information in the form of this picture. And that's application flow. So it's not jumping around. So building on common patterns, maps have common patterns. And if you use Google Maps, you'll be able to do this as well. Esri's JavaScript API does this. It has common keyboard shortcut patterns. So up, down, left, right, navigates the map, pans the map. North is up. May not always be the case, but it should be where you start. Plus and minus, zoom in, zoom out. One important thing with WCAG 2.1 is about hotkeys. So say I'm using a screen reader. Once the screen reader is on, I'm going to get a lot of hotkeys to do stuff like H will navigate between headers and that kind of thing. So when you add hotkeys to your app, which we will be doing here in a second, you want to make sure you want to limit the scope, and really you should make sure that there's an alternative. You can turn them on and off. So in this case, I'm limiting the scope of my hotkeys to when the map canvas is in focus. And that's also how up, down, left, right, plus, minus work. Once I tab off of the map, those no longer activate the map. So we got flow, we got hotkeys, which becomes important. We do a lot of click on this thing and view its pop-up. And if, say, you are not a mouse user, how do you do that, right? You're gonna have to use the keyboard. You're gonna have to purpose some keys for selecting. So one of my favorite tests with any app, and I highly encourage you to go out and download NVDA, the screen reader. It's free. Learn a couple basic commands on it to get you around a website. Because I want you to start listening to your applications, listen to your websites, go to your, like I work with Pollution Control Agency, so go to the homepage and just hear what it has to say. Listen to those alt text in the pictures and things. The screen reader is a great tool for testing. There's a lot of tests where you can run and it'll tell you what passes, what fails. The screen reader is going to give you an idea of, is this application useful? Did I accomplish the goal I set out to do? And the fun part about maps is that we have all kinds of information downloaded into the browser that we can use to do dynamic descriptions of the map itself. So we're going to go to this map in a second here. I can have the screen reader read to you, but I can't speak over it. So we're going to do a little jumping back and forth with how I'm sharing. But we're going to do a couple things. Looks like we're doing good on time, so this will be fun. So we're going to demo NVDA, the screen reader, and you'll hear what this mocked up website has to tell you. So we're going to go through the structure and the flow. So the heading, why are we here? What am I going to do? What are the results of that action that we looked at before? We are going to be as descriptive as possible. So I like descriptive alt text. A map is a picture. Let's describe it. Let's describe it well. It gives us information. We have data. Let's put that into a sentence the best we can and have it read. Yeah, and then we'll do a little fun experiment where I reduce the amount of information you have. You can listen to it again. And we can go back and we'll talk about how that was all done. So let's go on an adventure. So we'll be here. And again, you can see this focus flow. I have kind of a blue highlight to show where the focus is at. And I'm tabbing. So if I search, you see my focus move down to the search result, and that would be what was read by the screen reader. So I jumped that focus down. If I tab next, I end up at this map, up, down, left, right. And then I tab into its tools after that. So zoom out, change the base map, and then eventually into the links and out of the application. So it's a linear flow of focus order. All right, let's hear what this NVDA has to tell us about this. And again, I'm going to stop sharing and then I'll come right back. And we will hear not me, but NVDA.
Speech mode beeps, speech mode talk, AJ Ellison. What's in my neighborhood demo Google Chrome. What's in my neighborhood demo. The map is set to a state scale. Main landmark heading level 2 search for map accessibility. Desktop Windows ML source. What's in my neighborhood demo. The map is set to a state scale. Main landmark search results heading level 2. Search for facilities heading level 2. Banner landmark What's in my neighborhood and accessibility demo heading level 1. Main landmark search for facilities heading level 2. Find regulated activities and clean up sites by name or permit number. Main landmark. Enter your search terms. Edit site search blank. S. U. R. L. Y. Search results heading level 2 lists Surly Brewing Destination Brewery heading level 3. The site is in the following programs. Store. Search for facilities heading. Banner landmark what's in my search results heading level 2. List with 4 items heading level 3. Surly Brewing destination Surly Brewing Company heading Surly Brewing Co heading Surly Brewing / Northern Star Co redevelopment heading level 3. This site is in the following programs: investigation and cleanup. A map of Minnesota showing search results on top of satellite images. Use the I key to list points of interest. Application. This imagery with labels map contains the following 21 sites: Northern Star Co. BN equals. This imagery with labels map contains the following 3 sites: Northern Star Co., Surly Brewing / Northern Star Co. redevelopment, Northern Star ADM. You are panning west. This imagery with labels map contains the following 7 sites: Surly Brewing Co., Lewis Bolt and Nut Demo and Interim Grading, ADM Grain Co. 3, Vacant Property, Alman Enterprises Inc., Delmar Elevators, Archer Daniels Midland Company. The map covers Minneapolis, Hennepin County. It is set to a building scale. The map covers Minneapolis, St. Paul, Hennepin County, Ramsey County. It is set to a city scale. You are panning east. The map covers St. Paul, Ramsey County. It is set to a city scale. This imagery with labels map contains the following 70 sites, equals. This imagery with labels map contains the following 9 sites: Print Corner, Trucking Terminal / Garage, Old Site. This site. Search, enter your search terms. SLIP, SPIT 3. Search results heading level 2 list slip 3 heading level 3 slip, a map of Minnesota showing search results on top of satellite images. Use the I key to list points of interest. Application. Equals. You are panning east. The map covers Duluth, St. Louis County. It is set to a building scale. Speech mode off.
All right. Did everybody hear me? Or hear all the NVDA?
Yes, and yes.
All right. I didn't see a lot of hand waving. When I mouse over, it will read. So I had to be still. I couldn't check the comments. So let's share this again and we'll talk about what we just heard. Okay. So what you heard is mostly, once we were on the map, is this little div here. Now that little div with text, it's not really in the focus order. So there's a couple of things we need to do so that it's presented well on a screen reader. So what I'm doing with that div is I'm making it an ARIA Live region, and ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. And you want to make sure you use ARIA elements sparingly and correctly and test them. So a live region is a place on the web page that's updated by an alert, maybe a timer. There's some timeout. If it's timing out, you want that to be read without taking people off the form. So you'd use an ARIA Live region. And then an ARIA Live region has kind of 3 off, but it also has 2 additional settings. And the one I like to use is polite. So it waits for anything that's being read to be finished without interrupting. And then it will be read to the user out of order, like an alert. And then you can have it reread the whole content. You can have it reread the content only when the content is different. The changes things. You can have it reread the whole thing or reread only what has changed, that kind of stuff. And then the data we have are just the data that are available to us from the JavaScript API and our data sets that we're looking at. So we can run queries and get kind of the contextual state, county, municipality, if we had a good neighborhood data set, that'd be really cool. Like, oh, you're in Bryn Mawr, something like that. You can kind of overdo this if you read all of the streets, but if that was important to the context of the application, you can say you're at 35, Interstate 35, or whatever you need to be, 8th Street South. So any data you have, you can query using the maps extent and get a list back. You'll notice that it talks about scale. So we know the numbers, what number is it at? And what I've done here is I just assigned a range, and I call those ranges something. So state, county, township, city, building, to get an idea of like where zoomed in level am I, and then also contextually which city am I in, or whatever happens to be needed. The other thing I was doing was I added this I key hotkey, and what the hotkey is doing when I hit I is just running that query. It's kind of using a smaller extent just so I don't have smaller lists. And you can see there's a highlighted box that kind of illustrates what I'm querying. And I'm taking the results of that query and I'm putting them in a div that's being read by alert. But you do other things. You could have a query that opens the pop-ups or opens a list of items that you can then dig into more. And that's essentially what Google does.
Jason,
Yes.
I'm so sorry. There are a ton of questions, but this one is very appropriate to this moment.
Okay.
Melissa asked if it's possible, and this may not be possible within our time frame, so that's okay. Is it possible to zoom in on the bar of text you were referring to? It's very small.
Oh, yes. That is another accessibility issue. So we need to meet 400 times zoom, which is quite big. This is a way that a lot of people interact with websites, zoomed in, so they can read them well. And in this example, I've downplayed this little div. But like I said, you can do anything with the data you get back. I put it into a div and I set it to the same style as this sources piece, so they kind of look the same. But again, you could take that, let's look at Google. Let's do this. So if I shift tab on Google Maps, shift tab. See, Google, you got work to do. This illustrates my point, I think. Anyways, they have a box and it gives you points of interest. Why I'm not getting there, I don't know. But we'll abandon that one. So you could do, use it for search and populate the search results based on that I key. Let's go through a quick hover test. Like all of this hover content will display the alt text that I put in there. So an alt text for the app, alt text for the search, submit your search terms, zoom in, zoom out. The map pane itself is kind of descriptive, so you know what it is once it comes into focus. This is what's being read to the user. It's also being shown on hover. I kind of call this the hover test because you want to see that alt tagging being displayed as you hover over the elements. And that's also what's going to be read.
Jason, I'm going to jump in with a very time appropriate one while you're in here. Is that div part of an off-the-shelf Esri widget of some sort, or is it a custom built with an API?
It is not custom. And I notice we're getting closer to 2. Yeah, so all of these solutions, let's just conclude this real quick. We'll just go right here. So all of these techniques have been documented and developed, some of them with Esri, and some ideas that we've shared with Esri, and some of their older ideas, some of them Google implement. So there's some resources, there's some blogs, building accessible web maps. This Esri blog from 2023 talks about focus flow. And so like when you search and it comes to a pop-up as focused, you close the pop-up, it should send you back to the search box. So that's kind of taking control of that focus flow. It's not part of the widget. You have to do that. So on close, you do a thing. That thing is focus, the element that you want it to take you to. And then this 2024 post by Kitty and Jessica McCall. That one has a lot of the map descriptions. So I was showing the description. You don't have to display the description. You can have it read and not displayed. Their older A11Y map repo kind of has that box where it's doing identifies. So you're using the tools of the API to do your own tasks. You make it work for yourself. I don't really have canned examples to hand out because I don't know what framework you're using, what technology you're using, that kind of thing.
So Jason,
Mhm.
there are a ton of questions. Do you mind
Okay.
if we jump in with those?
Yeah, let's do it.
And then Jason, if you try and highlight all those and paste it into a chat, I assume the links will not come through, but which someone asked if they could get the
Give it a
links
shot.
now. But again, everyone, the slides will be shared. The information from the chat will be shared. We'll be good to go. While he is doing that, I know I've been keeping track of questions, as has Emily. A bunch. Oh, go Jason. There you go, Wolfgang. A bunch have been answered by Amy while Jason was presenting, but let's dig in. If you don't hear your question, drop it back in the chat again. And from North Dakota, do you know how many states have a comparable state-level Office of Accessibility that coordinates accessibility challenges and tries to remove barriers consistently for state government? Amy, I figure you might be the...
I don't know about other states as far as their Office of Accessibilities. Ours kind of is a giant house, but there's a lot of different groups that work within the accessibility realm. Like all of our map group, like we have the one of the leads of the Office of Accessibility, that's our champion for our group if you're looking at project management layout. But the vast majority are just in all these other agencies and stuff, people that just have an interest in map accessibility who are just there to learn. There are those of us who are putting together, some trainings and things like that. So we're not totally sure how other states would address that, but I would assume their Office of Accessibility should be included in discussions.
Perfect. John Lanza asked, and I doubt you'll know this, but does the state of Tennessee have anything similar? And John, I assume you meant by that, an accessibility group, which Amy just spoke to. So let's see, Sarah dropped some, yes, Colorado has a really good program as well. Sarah put something in there. John, I would suggest you talk to Dennis Peterson. I can try and drop I'm gonna drop that into the chat. He is the representative to NSGIC for the state of Tennessee, and he would be at least a place to start. In the meantime, let's keep going. Now, I think it's Jen Hawes. You asked, do you talk about making an accessible PDF after generating the map, like proper tagging, alt tag, logical reorder, and how a screen reader will read it? Amy, you put some answers in there. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a lot of training already that Adobe provides for tagging and accessibility and things like that. We specifically kind of guide our training and documents to when you have a map. For example, when I have, so I use ArcPro to do all the analysis and everything, but I bring it in in a georeferenced way with Avenza's map publisher into Illustrator. And then my final product is a map and then a text guide. Illustrator is not amazing when you do an auto tag. So I have to physically go in and tag everything. I make my map a JPEG, insert it, add an alt text. But then I have to go in and personally tag everything within the document, go through the reading order, check that out, check your tag tree. That's another thing because the reading order and the tag tree don't always match up. And there is like Adobe does have like that read out loud, which is not nearly as amazing as an actual screen reader, but it does have like the ability to read your tags. And so you'll know if they're actually in order. So that's kind of the process that I run through to get my information. So everything is done basically. So the design is done in an accessible format, and then we put that into a PDF or whatever. Most of it is all tagging by hand in Acrobat.
Fantastic. Thank you. John Jay put information on April Romero in the chat, so that'll get you what you want. Next question. Aaron, lots of answers were given. I see you're still on here. Aaron Fashaway, do you feel comfortable with the answer? How was the protanopia filter applied, or would you like a few more specifics? And I know you're probably muted and maybe stepped away.
Oh, and just a note, our accessibility coordinator for the state, Jay Wyant, who's our champion, is on the chat right now. And so he's put his contact information out there if you're interested in that. But as far as the question goes, so I mean, I used, well, before all these color filters became integrated into all the different software, I was using Color Oracle to look at the entire thing. And so when I did that protanopia filter, I did a snippet, I delayed the snippet, turned on Color Oracle because it goes away when the snippet comes on, and then, did that. So you can kind of see what it would look like if you're not using a software like QGIS, I don't think has color vision simulators built into the software, but Color Oracle is a free thing online. If you're looking at your text on a background, Color Contrast Analyzer is a great tool to use. There's a bunch of other tools out there that I just haven't used because I love the two that I use. But a lot of software does have those things built in. So you can use those, and I've tried to check them out because like Adobe has one built into a website, and there are some differences between the color filters. So one size isn't a fit all. Like I said, we are limited by technology. If we don't have someone, like when we were first developing our materials, we did have volunteers that had color vision deficiency actually look at these things and say, how does this work? And so we bounced it off of a lot of coworkers that we knew that had varying levels. But again, nothing is perfect. You could have protanopia, but again, there's lots of variables within each one of those color vision deficiency levels. So it's not going to be a one size fit all.
We have 4 minutes left and 28 questions or so. So I'm going to try and fly. Here in Arizona, part of the accessibility scope is including spoken languages such as Navajo and Hopi in our digital material. Do you have any quick thoughts on how to add recorded audio files and translations to geospatial data?
I don't have any thoughts about adding it to the data itself. I think the intent of your application would have to be to share audio and share interviews and that kind of thing. Minnesota has a We Are Water Minnesota app, kind of a traveling gallery that does that. But languages, I think, are super interesting, and kind of really want to get a handle on how to switch between languages. Maybe someday AI will be better at doing that kind of thing, Google Translate. But how do we communicate correctly in languages that we know our audience are speaking? Yeah.
And a little side note with that too.
Fantastic.
So we've been we've been creating some maps that also use Ojibwe language as the translation. So some of our parks actually have like the English name as well as the Ojibwe name for everything. And so we've
Mhm.
found that we've had to write it out specifically and then have the screen reader read the content of that page, which isn't the best way to do it because the screen reader pronounces things a lot different. I think it's built for certain languages, and Spanish and Ojibwe have been very difficult sounding. So I don't know if there's
Mhm.
different, like maybe we're just using an English language version of whatever it is, but if there are ones that are built specifically for certain languages, I don't, it's harder for them to translate because they don't enunciate and pronounce things correctly.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump in with questions. A lot of them were answered. So Anna said she's gotten different results from different screen readers when analyzing story maps. Can you recommend a preferably free screen reader app to analyze maps and apps? What's your fave?
I
I
can.
know different answers for different types, but Jason.
My fave is NVDA. It's the one I have the most experience with. It is free, and yeah, I think I would recommend finding one that you're comfortable with and using that. I did want to mention, one of the things that is a huge miss that we're not doing enough of is developing things with people, for people, having them tested and reviewed. Now, these are all ideas to get content to people, but it comes back to nothing for us without us. I'm at the end of the day, I'm guessing, right? I'm going through these experiences to the best of my ability and trying to provide additional experiences on these applications and maps and PDFs and things. But yeah, if we can get more testing and more feedback and more review, that would be just amazing.
Thank you. Do you encounter, we'll get in as many as we can. I know people are going to start dropping off, so I'm going to say thank you to Jason and Amy right now. These slides, the presentation, and many of these links will be shared to attendees within about a week. So thank you, Amy and Jason. Do you have 5 more minutes or do you need to drop off? Okay, we'll get
Yep.
as many as
Good.
we can. Do you encounter, remember, brief. Do you encounter conflicts in creating accessible maps? For example, something made for colorblind people may not work for low vision. If so, how do you resolve that? Amy, I see you nodding.
So there's been an area like, so for example, well, we try to keep our maps as simple as possible, and we can't, like I said, we can't address everybody all at the same time. Usually low vision has something to do with like just white space around symbols and making sure that your text is popping off and that the edges of whatever it is that you're showing are very clean. So people with color vision deficiency, like we have added, like on our fall colors map, some people weren't able to see the integrated colors that we had on there. So we provided the little toggle and added some color brewer scales in there so that people could use a high contrast version. So someone would be able to turn that on and hopefully be able to see the content a little bit more clearly. But again, it's not a one size fits all kind of content thing. I've only had 2 requests for alternative content in my almost 27-year career, and it was just to make some maps bigger. So I just plotted them out on the plotter, sent them, and that addressed the need for those requesters. So, and you do have time to mitigate if you do have like somebody who's needing something and you don't have an alternative format already kind of planned out for it. You can't be sued immediately for having a product that isn't fully accessible or whatever. You do have time to mitigate and try to work within reasonable accommodation on the product that person is looking for. So, we were looking at soils maps. I mean, how would you create an alternative format for that? And we'd be able to maybe describe the content of what's in a soils map, but it's difficult to kind of explain like where things are in a geographical and graphical format. But we would have a person be able to talk about like, 20% of this is this and blah, blah, blah. And so there's different ways that we come up with our alternative formats, but we should be thinking about it every time we create a product.
Right.
Someone asked, oh, sorry, Jason.
Nope, go for it.
Do you avoid Google Maps? It's pretty straightforward.
I do not. I don't know why I wasn't getting my keyboard access to work in my demo there with Google Maps, but they could do a better job.
And Esri base maps are usually what we use for a lot of our interactive maps. In the DNR, at least, they are our state enterprise licensed vendor for GIS products. And so we have been working with Esri to try to fix up base map and try to change things. And then like our campground reservation system is going to like an Esri base map kind of thing. And we've been working on like, oh, we want this base map thing. We want it pulled back 50%. We want our symbols to be changed at different scale levels. So there's different things that you can do when you're creating maps within the Esri framework that are able to be made more accessible.
Got it. How did you create the scale level descriptions? Is it in the base map scale descriptions? Was it coded?
It was coded, and all I'm doing is getting the scale zoom property from the map itself and assigning names to ranges.
Perfect.
So I can add that.
What do we do when we have a map where color is key, such as a heat map? Could we use an alternative version, and what would a good one look like? I've been hesitant to use one broad description as an alternative version, but as that didn't feel like a very equitable experience.
For that, I would recommend the other, like the toggle version of it. So come up with a completely different color ramp that has varying levels. And then there's like you can go up to like 7 colors, I think, on a color ramp of opposite ends of the color wheel or whatever to make it accessible or more accessible to more people. But again, it's harder if you have more than 7 levels of information that you're trying to portray in that way.
Great. And I'm going to ask, oh, sorry, Jason, please.
I was going to say, this is where making things more accessible makes them more useful for everyone.
Perfect. Good call. This is the last question that I saw that didn't get answered. So it's Wolfgang's question. If I missed it, you've got 1 more minute to drop it in. Do you distinguish between, Jason, that's code. I'm like,
Sorry.
Error.
It's not scary, I promise.
Aaron, yes, okay. Do you distinguish between internal and public accessibility standards?
Generally, no. I mean, well,
I see both.
Yes.
I would say the same. I
But-
mean, we don't require everyone to take accessibility training, but if you're doing anything for the public, like I might be in the middle of designing something and I don't make it fully accessible until I have the full version. But internally, there's still a lot of folks in our group in the DNR that don't know accessibility. And so we are working with everyone that we can to try to make anything that goes out to the public for sure is going to be accessible. But internally, if we're just sending back drafts and stuff like that, we try our best. But again, you're sometimes doing 17 different drafts. And then if you have to make something accessible every single time outside of your design, such as a PDF or something, it's usually a given, like I need to know in the end, how are you going to use this and then make it accessible in the format that it's going to be used. Is it going to be sent as a PDF or just a JPEG? There's 2 different ways of how we address digital accessibility in that realm. So that's kind of the intent, is to kind of do whatever we need to do for digital accessibility in the end.
And you know what? There are 2 more. One, I should ask this, even though 3 more just jumped up. Doesn't no, it's old actually, but does the April 2026 deadline rule read alternative formats aren't really preferred or allow or shouldn't be leaned on? They use contact us if another format is needed. And I get the feeling they're hoping that covers the rule. But many comments are like, they don't think contact us covers what you need to legally have done. And I see you 2 nodding.
Yeah, that's correct. Great to have there from a user experience perspective. It's not a first choice. So if you have a map and the data can be displayed in a table, present both.
But again, like a wayfinding map is like a graphic. We treat it as like a photograph. It's not going to meet contract standards. It's not going to be meeting like you can't tag everything because it means nothing, just tagging road labels and things like that. So
Right.
we just offer it because I mean it's important to offer it, but like I said, I mean you don't have to use alternative formats. Don't always have to be a physical document or a physical web page or whatnot. It can be a person as well.
Okay.
I
I
think something
shared-
you said was really important, that was on my mind too, is we treat these maps like images when it comes to accessibility. Essentially, that's what they are. So if you're applying text on text, text on background contrast standards to your map labels, good luck. You're going to have a really hard time. So we try to do is make the best image that we can that works for as many people as it can. But know that that has to be described, whether it's in a table or just a long form description. And that it's essentially a picture at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So that's a good
And
place to start.
And we've had to work with our leadership to say, I mean, we've worked with so many different folks, like nothing can be 100% accessible. Like we
Mhm.
do what we can to within the tools and resources that we have available. But again, everybody's visual or hearing impaired or whatever, their abilities are going to be different. And so there's not a one size fits all for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And when you're doing your accessibility scans, the map's going to get flagged because you're going to get like tiles and things that get flagged, where I might be treating it as a single picture. The reality is it's several overlapping, transparent pictures. And so automated testing will see that and tag those as not meeting compliance. So those are some of the things you have to work on with your accessibility whoever's doing the testing, to get exceptions to, and to demonstrate why and how this is being made accessible.
This is the very last question from a manager. Did you do any type of cost analysis that looks at how much it costs per map or application or the staff time only so that you can budget so states can say, look, Governor, yes, this is important and it's going to take 3 extra staff. Did you do any type of cost analysis?
I would say no, because every product is going to be different. If you're developing a web product, it's going to be different. Like when I'm doing my maps, I know that it's going to take me about 7 to 10 minutes to make every one of my maps accessible. So I make, because everything that we put online, well, there's like 3 different versions I have to make just for meeting standards for different things. But there's no cost analysis that covers like the gamut of all the different accessibility things. Once people are properly trained and get used to doing what they're supposed to do within their job, it actually like makes it just go so much more quickly. And then the cost analysis would go down. You would need less time and money to make those products accessible. If people are trained on design in the front end of things, then when you convert it to a PDF or when you're publishing it like within a different web frame or whatnot, hopefully a lot of that carries through, and then there's less that needs to be done in the after fact. So getting people properly trained, I think is key. And that's at the beginning of a product. So you're not trying to reconfigure things after the fact, because that takes a lot more time and effort.
Yeah, we work it in. So we do projects for the Pollution Control Agency, which is like DEQ, other states, or DNR. And it's built into the project proposal and the timeline. I like to see a sprint of refactoring for it. So whether that's 2 weeks or 4 weeks. So in that way, it is budgeted in. It's a requirement of all our projects and anything that we put into the public space.
And also for vendors, we're creating vendor guidance,
Yes.
basically, because we work with a lot of different, we don't always have the staff in DNR, and I'm sure
Mhm.
PCA is the same, but we do hire out a bunch of vendors to do different things, and we say accessibility, but we need to make it like laid out in the accessibility guidelines that they need to follow our guidelines for anything that's going to be like designed or whatnot, but then WCAG standards for anything. So like our campground reservation system, we're working with an outside vendor who will remain nameless, but they're doing a terrible job. They're not making things WCAG compliant, either visually or in the back end of everything. So when they added the Esri maps, I fell into a death loop. I couldn't tab through things. I couldn't get out of the map itself. So again, that doesn't meet, but we had to explain out a lot of these things for any of our vendors that we work out with on a regular basis or new projects or whatnot. So
Mhm.
we make sure that it's known that they have to follow our guidance as far as certain things go, but then we CAG or whatever the product is. We make it clear and spell it out in the contract now, because just saying something's accessible means something very different to many different vendors.
All right, I can't believe 200 people stayed extra time, but I can because this was so helpful and so fascinating, and I would just give a lot of money to be where you guys are now. We're more at the, all right, how do we do this for 1,000 apps? But thank you everyone for staying. And again, Amy and Jason, thank you for your expertise. The materials you've put out there, they are so helpful. We really appreciate this. We'll send out the information to everyone. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Thursday afternoon, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks for
everyone.
having us.